We are so delighted to have Esther Havens with us, this globe-trotting photographer that has been a part of so many iconic brands over the last 10 years. Welcome to the gathering.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Photographic images. I was looking at some of the covers that you've graced, the most iconic, actually, social awareness programs probably in the United States. Tom's Shoes, Raven and Lily, Noonday, Malaria No More, Charity Water. What do you have that these iconic brands want? They're coming to you.
Mm-hmm. I asked myself that same question. I think it's just the real life human story. I feel like for a long time, organizations have told a story of just pity and told a story that connected, I think, with a donor's audience, with their donor audience. But it wasn't a story that dignified people. And so a lot of those organizations come to me and say, hey, Esther, how do we tell our story in a way that's going to respect the people that we're working with? They want to do it right. And so that's many times what they want to prove what they're doing, and they also want to raise funds so that their programs continue to happen. And the second reason I would say they come to me is because they want the people that they work with to be treated with respect. And I think that there's a very, very thin line on how we do that, which is how I try to educate all the organizations I work with, just like we don't point cameras straight in somebody's face. You know, what are the steps that it takes to make somebody feel comfortable in front of the camera if I'm in a culture of people that, don't like the camera? How do I work my way in there to get people to trust me?
Where does this come from? Is this something in your childhood that kind of prepared you for this? I mean, this is not normal photography. I mean, obviously, you're doing something that's quite different. Where did it come from?
You're good at questions there, Steve. It does. So it's funny, nobody ever goes there. I was the kid that felt like the outcast most of the time. Like, I struggled for a long time to accept who God made me to be, and I felt for a long time that He made a mistake. And I remember being in high school just struggling, and it didn't matter what anybody said about me, but I was like, no, Lord, this is not who I am. Like, he had to speak words of life into me. And it was in India about 15 years ago now, that God had to show me that value of who I was in Him, that it didn't matter what anybody else's value was on me, but what His was, right? How He saw me. And that really changed who I was. That was
Explain that. What happened?
I was in a village in India, and I looked up at the stars, and my name, Esther, means star. And I just felt like the whole universe just surrounded me, and I've never felt God so close in that moment of just like, Esther, literally this is who I've called you to be. And it was pick up a camera. I had this vision of me jumping out of a helicopter with a camera. And I was like, are you sure, Lord? That's what you want me to do? And it was that was my moment of I felt like the Lord was saying, walk in this direction with your camera. I'll open the doors, but just follow me. And I loved photography, but I had no idea where He was going to take me with it.
No idea that, 10 years, that was 10 years ago?
That was almost 15 years ago.
No idea it was going to lead to something like this.
I loved photography. I loved photographing people. But I didn't know what photography could do. I didn't know how it could impact and change lives. And so that was really in that moment, God showed me who I was. And so I feel like I've been led down this path of seeing people in that same way that I saw myself, right? You see people just for their circumstance, see people from the outside. And the Lord's led me down this path of saying, Esther, that's the way you saw yourself. I want you to see past that. I want you to see my people who I see them as. And that's where the journey that I've taken to photograph is I want people to feel comfortable. If a person's not comfortable in front of the camera, you're not going to see who they really are. And so there's so many times I'll see a picture somebody shows me, and it's this picture like this. And they're like, look at my great photo. I'm like, that person is just looking at you wondering why this big black camera's in their face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the reaction. That's many times the photos that we have that we're sharing around the world. And I'm like, how do we get past that to make someone feel comfortable? And that means, sometimes I'm making jokes. Sometimes camera will be down for a day and I'm just hanging out with somebody so that they know they can trust me before I take their picture.
Now, you come from a family kind of staying with some of these early kind of influences, that is actually a family that's grown up a number of people in the arts. Many of your family members are involved in the arts in some way. Explain some of that. I mean, it's remarkable, actually.
You are. You did some research. Yeah, my father had his master's in music and was a musician. He played by ear and also read music, and he wanted to have the Von Trapp children.
The Von Trapps. It just doesn't rhyme with Haven. It's close.
So I was trained in music, actually. So from the time I was 3 years old, I was learning piano and violin, and my brother actually followed in suit with that. Both of my brothers play music. My brother is the lead singer of a Christian band called The Afters.
Great group.
They're amazing. He's done incredible music that glorifies God and has not given up, continues to keep going. And I actually asked him a question the other day. I said, Josh, do you ever get tired playing the same song every day? Like the same one over and over? He goes, Esther, I will never get tired of something that glorifies God and provides for my family. I was like, I'm your sister. You're allowed to be honest with me, and you share that with me. So we were just raised in an amazing family, homeschooled. My mom is from Holland, and she met my dad in the 70s, and they came over. And my mom's family is also comes from artists. My great-great-grandfather, no, it was my great-grandfather, was a Dutch painter in Holland, and his work is all over Europe. And so there's always this project in the back of my mind where I want to go to all the spots that he painted in the late 1800s and early 1900s and go and photograph those spots. It was incredible work. And so
it's interesting. When you talk with photographers, they often will tell you this is not as easy as it looks. How much of this is art and how much of this is science?
Yeah. For me personally, I feel like it's art. I'm not a scientist at all, and I'm not technical. And so when universities ask me to come and teach, I'm like, I will teach you things from my heart. But when it comes to the technical side of lighting and everything, I'm very experimental. Like I love to figure out, like I can know all the settings and how things are supposed to be, but I love to take the way things are supposed to be and throw them out the window. I think that's one of the things, one of the reasons my work has stood out in the past is like I'm always trying to bring new gadgets to the field to try something different, to be like, oh, let's try this type of lighting. And on my first trips to Africa, that's what I did. I was just trying different techniques of lighting to make people stand out in a different way. And for me, that's my form of art exploration.
And you also stand out because you're probably one of the most well-traveled international photographers. I have a blessing today. You're actually sleeping in your own bed here in Dallas. That's your home. Mm-hmm. But you've been in 50 nations over a very short time period. Where did you just get back from? Where are you going after this?
It's true. It's good to be home. I just got back from Cambodia with IJM. And so I'm still getting through the jet lag. Sometimes you can't shake it from Asia.
Exactly right.
But it was an incredible project where we were photographing these just the heroes that have battled sex trafficking in Cambodia and documenting them. And so from Her Excellency, the Secretary of State, to some of the police officers and even the judge, who's putting the perpetrators in jail. And so it was an awesome project. And so I came back from that, and I don't actually know what my next trip is. I've had lots line up, and I just felt like this next month I need to spend time home. I think that balance is so important, and it's hard to fight for, especially when you have so much opportunity. I think it's the same mindset here. A woman earlier asked a question about like, how do we know who to give to? When there's so many organizations asking, I have the same question come to me, how do I know who to work for? Right? And so one of the big questions I always ask myself, can I give them my own money? Can I speak about them? Do I believe in their vision enough that I can walk alongside them and advocate for them and their brand? And if I can't do that, then I can't work for them.
You can't shoot for them.
Mm-mm. And it's hard. Even if they're a huge organization, if I can't do that, I consciously cannot work for them.
Stay with me on this travel piece for a second. A lot of our gathering friends and family are travelers.
Yeah.
You travel a ton. How do you maintain that sense of balance?
Yeah. It's definitely something I feel like I'm always learning of what's too much and what's too little. Especially I'm now 32 and I'm not married. I definitely want to have a family one day. And my big question I go to people is I'm like, how do you do this when you do have a family, right? Is that even possible? And I don't know that it is. That is what I've kind of learned is like this. I always tell girls in their 20s, I'm trying to gather the girls in their 20s who are good that I can pour into to be like, you know what, now's the time. Go out and travel, tell the stories. That's what's important. But for me, the balance has just been like coming home and really being present when I'm home, like truly being home. And then when I'm travel, I'm on the road. And I think that for a long time, I had the expectation of just staying connected to home when I traveled, and I was always let down because I'd come back and I felt just lonely. I felt like I didn't have community, and I felt separated. And it's like, yeah, I was doing all these great things, but I remember being in India. I was in Calcutta by myself on a project, and I was sick with malaria in a hotel room, and I could not leave my hotel room because I'm a woman and I can't go to the streets and get food. And I wanted to go out, and I was like, okay, what am I doing? I'm out here, I'm telling these stories, and it's great, but like inside, I'm not thriving. I'm not like living. If I'm not in the place that I'm thriving and I can't pour out, right? You're at the end of yourself. And so I just realized the importance of community. And so the reason I moved to Dallas is there's a community here that I helped start called WELD. And it's a community of creatives and freelancers, and they travel all over the world. And to be around those like-minded people has been really helpful. It's a balance of like, I come back, they all know the journey I've been on. I go to work, we're all in one big space together.
Wow.
And it's just like, they're like, welcome back, Esther. How was your trip? We want to hear about it. There's a place to process it. I think that's important. And I think that people can have that in church communities. But the biggest thing I always tell travelers is like, you have to have community. You will fall apart if you're isolated and alone in it. And I think almost anybody who lives on the road will tell you that. You try to do it, and it's just not healthy.
And you've said you've put some boundaries as well in terms of how much travel you are going to do.
Yeah, so I try to do a trip every other month. And so 1 month I'm in the States, and that I do lots of speaking. So I travel around, and then 1 month with an organization traveling. And this, like in July, I shot for 4 different organizations. So I spent 4 weeks traveling in East Africa. I was like, I'm just going to bundle them all together this time, which is great. Then I can come back and edit like crazy. And so it's good. It's just definitely figuring out that balance of what is healthy, and so that I can continue doing this, because I think there's many times I've been so burnt out that I just want to quit.
Now, the younger Esther was underneath the stars looking up and didn't see this coming. Mm-hmm. What did you see coming when you were thinking, this is what I want to be when I grow up? What came to mind?
Yeah. I wanted to be a missionary.
You are.
My idea was, when I felt that was the Lord's calling to my life, I thought, okay, I'm going to go work for National Geographic and I'll secretly be a missionary, right? That was every young photographer's dream. And it's just funny because for me, that I just realized, I was like, that's not me. That's not who God created me for. I think that there was a bigger picture at play, and I love National Geographic. I love the stories that they tell, but I really want to tell the stories that are paired with action, that I love to tangibly see, hey, this is the story we told, this is the money we raised, and here's what we did with it. And I get to tell the stories like constantly. Last year, we did a food project in Rwanda with Africa New Life. I told the before story. Here's the situation. We put it online. It raised $500,000. And now I just went back and I'm like, here's what it did. It's so simple. But I feel like that when people can see that transparency, it's just tangible and they want to get involved. And so
you've achieved a very heady level of success at a fairly young age. I mean, photographers typically are achieving what you're achieving in their 40s, 50s with large portfolios, et cetera. How do you feel about that? And when you do look into the future, what do you see?
Yeah. I'm not a person who looks for success at all. I look at serving the Lord. There's a Mother Teresa quote, I love her, that I always think about, and I'm going to try to get it right here. I'm not called to be successful, I'm called to be faithful. And just that idea of obedience is everything. And I'm not trying to get somewhere. I'm not trying to get fame. I'm not trying to get anything for myself. I just want to be obedient to the Lord.
Right.
And so whatever that looks like, I don't know what tomorrow holds. And I live life in a very different way. I don't plan that out. And I think because of that, I'm always ready for whatever's next. And that could be jumping on a plane tomorrow. I thought this last week I might be in the Middle East, and I found that out last Friday. I might jump on a plane, and it's like my bags are packed. I'm ready. If someone calls, and there's a story that I feel connected to that I'm supposed to tell, I'll go. But I think living that way, it just allows God to move you, and being willing to say yes is important. I think that's always been I tell young photographers that all the time. Are you in a place where God can push you out the door, that you're ready to go?
And that you'd be ready to move if he said so.
Yeah, and that it's not, I think that our culture pushes success so much. It's you have to achieve this ladder of success. And in the places I've been around the world, I just don't think about that. It's not success, it's about survival. Yeah. And so when I hold these stories every day of people that have fought for their lives to survive, that's the last thing on my mind. My mind's how do I tell these stories so that we can pay attention to their story, right? To hear them out so that action takes place, something happens.
Last time we were here at the gathering, one of the kind of big issues for the 3 photographers that were interviewed had to do with what we might, amongst us photographers, call pity porn, where you actually take advantage of a person that you're photographing in order to get some sort of gain, versus giving somebody dignity. How do you, as a photographer, you're known for that. How do you do that? How do you take an image of someone in such a way that their dignity is left intact and we actually get to see the person for who they are versus what we're trying to make them into?
Yeah, for sure. I would say I didn't start doing it right in the beginning. For a long time, I photographed circumstance, what is. But I think that it's just imagining yourself as that person and treating others the way that you want to be treated. So when I show up to a place that I don't know a single soul, I go, okay, from the outside, if I was that person, how would I want to be treated? How do I want that photographer that's coming here with her camera, how do I want to be approached? How do I want to be greeted? And then some of the biggest ways right now is I just feel like most people don't know what's happening with their images. Is that if I did a shoot here in Dallas and I knew it was going to be marketed, which most organizations are marketing photos. That's what we're doing, right? Photojournalism we're telling stories, documentary work, but most organizations are telling stories to raise funds, and it's a sense of marketing. We're putting the photos on billboards, right? And so if we want to tell that story, they should know where it's going to go. If I did that in Dallas, I'd have everybody sign release forms. If I was taking your photo, I'd have you sign a release form to make sure you're not going to sue me if I use your photo and make money off of it, right?
Never sue you, I promise.
Right. I know, I'm just saying.
Absolutely kidding.
This is the perspective that we have here in the States. So why is it okay to go to communities where people live in poverty and take photos of their kids and put them on billboards?
Great point.
So that is that's what's stirring in me right now is this, it's a wrestle, because can I capture the moment still and ask for permission afterwards? Can I use your photo on these billboards and for this campaign on this website? I just think that it's important that every parent know that their child's photo is being put on a website. And I feel like this is a constant argument that I have with photographers or organizations to say what's right. And so one of the ways I've approached that on my trip in July, I would say 95% of the people I photographed, I got signatures for.
So you were actually doing that?
Yeah.
You were actually, was this before you actually took the photograph? You would ask?
Sometimes after.
Okay.
And so there's an app that I use on my phone to do that. And I try to teach organizations this so that they can do that. And I've just heard stories of people not finding out their photos are in pamphlets, and that was in Kenya, and they sued that organization in Kenya. And so I imagine if you were part of an organization, you took my photo and you were using it on pamphlets anywhere as part of, I would want you to ask me if that was okay. And so that's just a little picture into the piece of the dignity that I think that we need to bestow on people who live in poverty.
Do you see others that are following your lead in that way?
Absolutely. I think organizations, they're I think there's a wake-up call happening to that, especially with the influx of how much we use media and the access that the developing world is having to the internet. I think in the next 10 years, I mean, already every village I go to, if somebody's got some type of internet, and I just went back and I met a boy in Rwanda that I photographed 7 years ago. And I took an iPhone, I wanted to show him his story on the internet. And I was like, I want you to know that your story, brought clean water to hundreds of thousands of people. Like, you let me tell it all those years ago, and all these people have clean
And he
water.
had no idea.
He knew that we had photographed his story. He didn't know to the extent
of what it did.
And so I scrolled through the story, and he was just beaming. He was smiling. I'm like, all I did was Google his name, and it's on the internet, right? But he doesn't have access to the internet, right? He lives in extreme poverty and doesn't know. And so
That's a great story.
yeah, but it's cool to go back and find those. I'm gonna tell. I know I'm talking like crazy, but there's another little one I want to give you a snippet of, like, even going past that. How do we really make sure that we're doing it right? I was contacted by a publishing company to license one of my photos for a cover of a book. It's really easy to say yes, right? I photographed this photo, I think it was 7 years ago, and say, hey, yeah, we'll license it for the cover. I never asked that woman that I photographed that they wanted the cover for if I could put it on the cover of a book. But what I did was I said yes. I said, I'll license it, but you have to know that I have to go find her. Like, to actually approve this and make sure all goes through, I'm going to go find her. And so I went back to that village with the photo last year. And I mean, she's a woman.
7 years later.
7 years later. It was 6 years at the time. So 6 years later. And I just went with a photo. I'm like, do you know this woman? Do you know, her name is Mpandabundi. And they were like, the second woman I meet on the side of the road knows where she lives. I was like, so this woman gets in my vehicle with 3 kids she's got with her. She's got a baby on her back. And she takes us on this road and walks down. And I'm like, we got to find this woman. And we show up, and she wasn't there, so I had to wait a little while. But there's this little 6 or 7 year old walking around. And I was like, that's the baby. So it's like this woman, it's this iconic shot that I photographed all those years ago that the photo changed me as a photographer. So when God was like, stop seeing people on this level, I would lift them up. And I got down below this woman and looked up to her. And so I see this little girl walking around. I'm like, that's the baby on the back of my photo. And I realized she's all grown up. And so she eventually comes running up, the mom, and it was just this beautiful reunion. And we sat down, and I've told her story to so many people. I photographed, this beautiful, people have her photo hanging in their house. It was part of this light series that I did. And I said, how are you? And she lives with her 3 kids in a little hut. She sells vegetables in the market, and she's trying to survive and is barely doing it with all these kids. None of them are educated. And just that, for me, that was this realization of, I'm here on the other side of the world just taking pictures, selling them. Here she is, living in extreme poverty, suffering, right? So how do I bridge that? Like, where's dignity in that, right? And in that instance, I'm taking, right? I'm not helping her at all. And so I went and I got with my Rwandan friends, and I said, what do you think we should do? And they said that they thought it would be best to put their kids in school. And so I took the licensing money, and I sponsored her daughter until she's 18 to go to college, or to go to high school, elementary and high school. And so I got her other 2 kids sponsored as well. And so now I get to write with her because she's in a sponsorship program. It's great. I went to see her just a couple months ago to see how she's doing. We got her some chickens and brought her the book that she's the cover of. She was so excited. But now there's a relationship, it's so much more. And that's where I see it's like, it's not just a photo at the end of the day. It's not just, there's a person behind that photo. There's a life behind it. And it's like us connecting with it. It's so much more than just like this shot.
It's not enough that you hold these values. You're actually taking those values on the road. I mean, I was noticing you have the Light Year World Photography Workshop. Is this the kind of thing that you talk about in there? These kind of values, the dignity of people, how to raise that up with our image making? Yeah.
So Light the World Workshop, we did, the last one we did was 2 years ago. So I'm hoping to do one next year. But we take 7 photographers and 1 local photographer. And that's usually a person who's on scholarship, just because I believe we need to invest in local communities. And so we bring them, and then I just try to teach them all of those things. Like the first day, nobody's allowed to have cameras. And everybody's like, what? We came here to photograph. I'm like, it's not about you. I'm sorry. Like, if you think that we're taught here, it's about our portfolio to get the best pictures for your name, for your brand. And if you're serving people, it's not about you. We're serving these organizations. It's not about my name, my brand, or anything. Take us out of it. Our goal is to connect with people and tell their stories. And so that's what I try to break away. And it's very different when you have a wedding photographer, a commercial photographer coming into that arena, because that's not what we're taught, right? You're taught this. I've been with lots of photographers in the field, and many times it's distant. You're just taking the photo, and you can hide behind a camera so easily. And that's what we try not to do. I try not to hide behind it and be like, here, you can hold my camera, you can take pictures with it, like, get to know it. And can I take your picture and get into your life? Can I know your story? And I think there's still, we were talking about that today, just the responsibility of telling that story. Like, some people I have to change their name. Some people I just photographed a girl, I cannot show her face or tell you her name. And how do you do that in a way that still tells the story that makes her feel respected, you know? I remember I took some other ones because I was like, oh, wait, I want you to have some photos of your face. But it's really, really, really hard, especially just making sure that it's accurate and that it, at the end of the day, really respects them.
Well, I had asked earlier why these iconic social brands pick you. And I think in a very beautiful way, just your sharing of why you do what you do and how you do it has answered that question beautifully. Esther Havens, thanks for coming to the gathering. We so appreciate having you here.
Thank you. It's such a gift to be here.